The comic codes lasted for over 50 years and censored comics to the point of not even allowing zombies. The Comic Codes, or CMAA, was a government organization that censored comics to keep them kid-friendly for many different reasons. Parents believed it was implementing a communist idea into kids' heads, that it was causing violence among younger age groups, with showing violence, gore, guns, and crime in comics. This video is about the Comic Codes, the most hated topic by many comic book fans around the globe. From the 1950s through the 1980s, the censorship by the Comic Codes Authority has had a drastic effect on the history of American comics. From 1930 to 1950 was considered the golden age of comics. It was the point in time where anything was allowed. No restrictions, nothing. Eventually, parents did not like what their kids were reading because they believed that comics were bad for kids, as I explained earlier. But the tipping point was when Dr. Frederick Wertham, a psychiatrist, wrote a book called Seduction of the Innocent. This book spoke to what parents had been saying for years. It spoke about the communist idea and how it was rotting their kids' brains. This caused protests to start breaking out all around America to get rid of comics. In 1954, out of sheer fear, the government crumbled under pressure and decided to create the CMAA. Now every comic had to go through a process that checked for vulgar language, sex, alcohol, disrespect to the government, and many, many more restrictions. This sparked an underground comic industry. How it worked is that it would send comics directly to multiple head shops. And head shops were shops that mainly sold tobacco-related items. And that industry is still running today. Anyway, back to the CMAA. These restrictions kept it very strict until 1971 when Marvel wanted to do a drug abuse story, including Spider-Man. The CMAA approved this idea, and altered their ban on horror comics so they were less strict. In 1989, DC wants out with the CMAA because they were tired of it restricting the writers and illustrators. Skip to 2001 and Marvel completely stopped using the CMAA. And in 2011, DC officially stopped using it, which struck the final blow and the CMAA was no more. So now comics would have to get out to the public faster, as it didn't have to go through the Comic Codes process. The stamp of approval was gone, which was something that was on all approved comics. And finally, stores could handle non-restricted comics. It was much like the golden age of comics again. Today, comics are still going strong. Books have been written about the CMAA, one being Comic Books in the Cold War, 1946 to 1962. Essays on graphic treatment of communism, the code, and social concerns in 2012. With all this being said, it sparks a question: what would happen if the government didn't create the CMAA? Would parents learn to deal with their kids reading comics? Or would they be constantly vigilant and drive the comic industry into the ground? Nevertheless, the American Comic Codes had a massive effect on the history of comics through the 1950s and 1980s.